well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I am so glad you're with me on the program today. We have a fantastic conversation to get to here in just a minute or two. I had the opportunity to speak with Terrel Majette last night from Franklin, Virginia. Wrote about Terrel, I guess it was maybe last week. Terrel was at home when all of a sudden two little kids come tearing down the street, yelling about a guy with some knives who was threatening them. And Terrel, he acted to save one of those kids. And you'll hear that conversation again in just a moment. Before we get to that, though, we do have to talk about what the Supreme Court did today. And we have to talk about this for a second. Economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k account as the stock market braces for impact. With inflation on the rise and global uncertainty looming, it's clear why central banks and savvy Americans are turning to gold. If you haven't had your eye on gold, time to make it a priority. Priority Gold. Trust their team of proven professionals to help you diversify your savings with gold and silver. Call 1-800-405-GOLD or visit PriorityGold.com/golden for a free gold info guide. Plus, see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Experts agree that physical gold is one of the best ways to fortify your savings, no matter the economic environment. Act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market's golden. Call 1-800-405-GOLD to speak with a gold specialist or visit PriorityGold.com/golden to learn more. That's 1-800-405-GOLD. Well, the Supreme Court's decisions on the 13 Second Amendment-related cases that it was holding in conference, not exactly golden. It could be worse, but not great. So the Supreme Court, as I said, had 13 cases dealing with the Second Amendment that had been holding in conference, right? There were 6 prohibited persons cases dealing with various prohibited persons statutes. There were 6 affiliated challenges to the gun and magazine bans that are a part of the Protect Illinois Communities Act. And then there was Antoniuk versus James, which asked 2 questions. One, what is the time period that the courts are supposed to look at? Is it 1791? Is it 1868 when it comes to Second Amendment cases, right? What is that history that we're supposed to look back to? The second question was whether or not New York's good moral character clause for concealed carry permits violates the Second Amendment. All of the prohibited persons cases, as well as Antoniuk versus James, were what is called GVR'd, right? So the court granted cert, vacated the lower court decisions, and then they remanded the cases back down to the appellate court for further review. In this case, in light of what the court held in U.S. versus Rahimi. Now, I confess, I'm not sure that all of these cases actually needed to be GVR'd. You take a case like Garland versus Range, for example. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals held that Brian Range's Second Amendment rights were violated because of this statute that prohibits anybody from possessing a firearm if they've been convicted or pled guilty to a crime that's punishable by more than a year in prison. In the case of Brian Range, this was a misdemeanor offense under Pennsylvania law, but it was punishable by more than a year in prison. Brian Range pleaded guilty to falsifying his income on a food stamp application several decades ago. This was a nonviolent offense. Again, he got probation for this crime. And the Third Circuit said a lifetime deprivation of his Second Amendment rights is unconstitutional. It goes too far. I don't think that Rahimi did anything to unsettle the Third Circuit's decision, right? In Rahimi, the Supreme Court held that temporarily depriving somebody of their Second Amendment rights after they have been after a judge has deemed them a danger to others does not violate their Second Amendment rights. But again, in Mr. Range's case, the deprivation wasn't temporary. This was not a violent offense, right? And the Third Circuit found that Mr. Range was entitled to his Second Amendment rights. So I don't know what a GVR accomplishes there other than to kick that case and the other cases down the road a bit. And that's what happened with the Illinois gun and magazine ban challenges as well. You know, the last time we talked with Chuck Michel from the California Rifle and Pistol Association, he reminded us that these cases are scheduled to go to trial before U.S. District Court Judge Stephen McGlynn in September. And so even Chuck said, I don't know how likely it is that the court's going to grant cert in these cases, given that this is an interlocutory appeal. The case is proceeding to trial just a few months from now. The court may take a wait-and-see attitude. And that's essentially what the court did. Justice Samuel Alito said that he would have granted cert in the Illinois cases. Justice Clarence Thomas would have granted cert as well. In fact, Justice Thomas wrote a statement about the Illinois cases, but the cert was denied, and so these cases remain in the Seventh Circuit, and technically in Judge McGlynn's courtroom. That's the next stop for these cases. But let's look at what Justice Thomas had to say here for just a second. In his statement, he said, "We've never squarely addressed what types of weapons or arms protected by the Second Amendment. To be sure, we explained in District of Columbia versus Heller that the Second Amendment's protection, quote, extends prima facie to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, even those that were not in existence at the time of the founding. And we noted that the Second Amendment does not protect those weapons not typically possessed by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes, recognizing, quote, the historical tradition of prohibiting the carrying of dangerous and unusual weapons." He went on to say, "This minimal guidance is far from a comprehensive framework for evaluating restrictions on types of weapons, and it leaves open essential questions such as what makes a weapon bearable, dangerous, or unusual." The Seventh Circuit, in overturning an injunction that had been granted by Judge McGlynn against the gun and magazine ban, held that the plaintiffs were not likely to prevail on the merits of their argument when this case goes to trial. They held that AR-15s are like machine guns, and therefore they fall outside of the scope of the Second Amendment. Justice Thomas took the Seventh Circuit to task today, saying that the decision, quote, illustrates why this court must provide more guidance on which weapons the Second Amendment covers. By contorting what little guidance our precedents provide, the Seventh Circuit concluded that the Second Amendment does not protect militaristic weapons. It then tautologically defined militaristic weapons as those that may be reserved for military use. The Seventh Circuit's contrived non-militaristic limitation on the arms protected by the Second Amendment seems unmoored from both text and history. And even on its own terms, the Seventh Circuit's application of its definition is nonsensical, noting that the AR-15, this was citing a dissent from then Justice Brennan that the AR-15 is a civilian, not military weapon. No army in the world uses a service rifle that is only semi-automatic. Justice Thomas concluded, in my view, Illinois' ban is, quote, highly suspect because it broadly prohibits common semi-automatic firearms used for lawful purposes. It's difficult to see how the Seventh Circuit could have concluded that the most widely owned semi-automatic rifles are not arms protected by the Second Amendment, which is absolutely right. Now, the bad news is that nobody signed on to Justice Thomas's statement there. Justice Alito indicated that he would have granted cert, so presumably he agrees with Justice Thomas, but it would have been nice to see Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, maybe even Justice Barrett sign on to Clarence Thomas's statement. They did not. And ultimately, the Supreme Court, after telling us in Rahimi, boy, we need to take more cases. Hey, listen, it's in the early innings of this Second Amendment ball game, right? Just give us some time. The court punted. You know, they had 13 opportunities to take a case for next term. They said no to every one of them. Now, the court will hear Vanderstock versus Garland in the fall. And that is a challenge to the ATF's frame and receiver rule. That's not, again, a Second Amendment case. That's an Administrative Procedures Act case. And based on the demise of the Chevron doctrine, I think that the ATF's rule is in real trouble. But you know, the court, again, we had so many justices tell us, hey, just give us some time. We got to take more of these cases. We got to flesh these things out. And then they decided to kick this can down the road a little bit more. So it is frustrating. Could have been worse. They could have just denied cert altogether. But this mushy middle ground, I don't think is going to satisfy anybody. And it does mean that at least in the short to medium term, these gun bans, these magazine bans are going to continue to be enforced not only in Illinois, but in other states around the country. And they may even proliferate in more anti-gun states until the Supreme Court steps in. We will have more on this. I'm trying to connect with Chuck Michel from the California Rifle and Pistol Association and Cody Wisniewski from the Firearms Policy Coalition. I know that we had said that we would have them on to talk about the orders from conference. Hopefully we'll be able to do that tomorrow here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Right now, though, I do want to get to our conversation with Terrel Majette. A great conversation. I got to say, well, you'll see in the interview, I was just so impressed with Terrel, his attitude, and everything that he had to say. He really made an impression on me, and I hope that he'll make an impression on you as well. Take a look and listen. Terrell, thanks so much for coming on the show. It is really good talking with you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
So, I guess my first question is, I mean, has anything like what happened a couple of weeks ago ever happened to you before? I mean, this sounds like this was just a quiet, normal night, and all of a sudden, in an instant, there's something that is serious that you've got to deal with.
Yeah, this I have to say this is really the first time something like this has ever happened. It was a typical day off, I would say. It started off as just a day. Me and my brother we got together, and me and him both we really like listening to quartet gospel music. So we were together and we were listening to music, and everything was going fine. And he was about to leave, and he kept holding me there. We kept on talking. We kept going back and forth. We couldn't let each other go. And all of a sudden, two little kids they came running, and the little boy he ran in the house, and the little girl she ran to me, and instantly it was like we have a decision that we have to make right now.
When did you know that something was wrong? I mean, well, I guess not just something was wrong, but when did you know that these kids were being chased? I mean, were they screaming or yelling anything as they were running down the street?
So when they were running down the street, they weren't saying anything. They just was running as fast as they could, and I know that's because they were obviously looking for help. And the little boy he ran in his house so fast that the little girl came over, and she's like, "Excuse me, sir." She's saying, "There's a man down there. He's chasing us with two knives." And it took a minute for that to process. I'm like, wait, did she just say what I think she did? So instantly, my first response for her was to go home. Get in your house. I just want you to get safe. Go in your house, let your parents know what's going on, run in your house. And she's like, I can't go in my house because this guy lived next door to her. So she would have had to pass his house in order to get to her house. So once she told me that, it was like, okay, now I have to protect this little girl.
So is that when you decided, all right, I need to get my gun just to be careful, just to be safe?
Well, not at that very moment. I'll tell you what happened. At first, I kind of got up, and if you watch the video, I got up and I went just so I could look. There's a tree that kind of obscured my view from where I was sitting on my porch. So I got up and I walked down off my porch just so I could get a better view of the guy. And when I looked down there, I could see him standing in the middle of his yard with what appeared to be two knives, and they were pointed in a downward direction. He was just standing there like a zombie. So at that point, that's when I decided, okay, let me go get my gun, just in case. And sure enough, as I went and got my gun and I'm coming back, I hear my brother who was sitting in his car protecting his daughter. He's in his car and he's saying, bro, hurry, hurry, he's charging, he's charging. So he hops in his car, and as I come out, that's when I'm coming down the steps, and I loaded the gun, and that's when we had our standoff right there.
So your your little standoff. Can you talk a little bit more about what that little standoff consisted of? I mean, obviously and thankfully, you did not have to pull the trigger, right?
No, thankfully, I didn't have to pull the trigger. I was able to just talk to him, and even though I was furious at the thought of him chasing this innocent little girl with two knives and of course a little boy, I was also furious because I don't know if you can hear in the background, but there's a lot of kids in the neighborhood and they play outside all the time. So that same little girl had just came to my house probably about 30 minutes prior to this whole incident. And she asked me if my two sons, who are 9 and 8 years old, could come outside and play. And because they were grounded for not doing, their chores, I told her, I said, no, they can't come out today. And I'm just so thankful that my kids weren't out there because I don't know, honestly, if it would have been the same type of reaction. I don't know if I could have responded as calmly as I did.
Yeah. And this is the type of neighborhood. I mean, it sounds like where kids can go out and play. Like you never had anything like this happen before.
No, no. I mean, the kids go outside, they play all the time, and the parents, we have a good relationship. So if the kids get out of line or they start playing too rough or something like that, us as parents, we can talk to each other and say, hey, they were a little wild today or something like that. But it's typical. That's kind of the way we grew up, and being able to play outside with friends and stuff like that is something that you don't really see often.
Right.
So we were excited about our kids being able to play outside. I mean, for the past few years, we lived away from our family, and we didn't have this type of close knit relationships with the neighborhood. So this is all new for me. It's new for my children, and for something like this to happen, it's really kind of shaking our household.
Yeah, because one of the things that I saw in the one local news story that appeared about this incident, I'm kind of shocked, by the way, that this didn't get more media coverage. We'll talk about that in a minute. But apparently, the police there in Franklin said they've dealt with this individual before. He was, I guess, taken off for a mental health evaluation. Um, have you seen him since? Is he back? And how concerned are you that again something like this might happen in the future?
Well, yes, just like you, I did see that same report, and I actually didn't see it until I read it in a newspaper article because, even though I'm fortunate that the police showed up in a decent amount of time, they didn't communicate with us well, during the situation or afterwards. So what we heard about this man and his mental illness and issues, we didn't find out until the media got behind it and started pushing the story. So, that part was a little frustrating because we didn't even know that we had these type of individuals, and we don't look at them in a bad way or anything, but we didn't even know that that was a possible threat to our neighborhood.
Yeah. And again, yesterday on the show we were talking about mental health and the stigma about mental health, and I don't want to add to that stigma, but this is somebody who again has shown themselves to be at least potentially dangerous, right? These kids certainly believe
Correct.
that they were in harm's way. He did have knives. He was taken into custody. So I hope that he does get the help that he needs, and I hope that again, your kids and all the other kids in the neighborhood are able to get out and enjoy the type of childhood that you and I had growing up, right? Where we just get together with our friends and we knew we had to be home when it got dark, or else we get
That's
grounded.
right. That's right. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I hope that that's what happens here, but it is concerning that you're getting this, just from the media, not from the authorities. So hopefully there's better lines of communication there with you folks in the neighborhood and in the police department going forward. So, talk about that de-escalation if you can for a second. I mean, you said that the fact that this wasn't your kids kind of gave you that degree of separation where you could sort of be a little bit more calm and detached.
Correct.
What did you do to again to de-escalate that situation? What did you say to him?
So when I first came outside, I was just basically telling them, I said, hey, 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 please, please stop, 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 because he was literally running. And that part I visualized as I was coming out of the house. He was running down the street. My brother hurry up and kind of ducked into the car, and he didn't have a weapon or anything on him, so he locked his doors, rolled the window up, and he basically had his foot on the gas. Like if anything go wrong right now, before he charged at you, I'm gonna have to run over him. And I'm thankful that he was there. But when he came down the street and I saw him and I cocked the gun back and I'm sitting there and I'm like, sir, please. And I never raised my weapon towards him. I raised my hand. I kept my weapon down at my side because I have been trained about how to use a weapon. I am a 8-year veteran in the Army. Um, so I know rules of engagement. I know these type of things, and I have had a career in security as well. Um, but no matter how many times you train for the worst possible things, you never know how you're really going to respond when that actually happens. And all I could do was just ask him nicely because I did not want him to take another step in our direction. If he would have taken another step, if he would have crossed over into my actual yard, and I don't have a wide yard, but if he'd have crossed into my yard, I would have had to take action. And that's something that I really did not want to do. I didn't want to hurt this man. I didn't want to, more importantly, I didn't want to do it in front of the children. I didn't want them to have to live with, my kids were standing at the door. These are things that the video can't see. My brother's daughter was sitting in the back seat of his car, and there were more kids in the neighborhood. And it was just one of those things that this could have been a tragic moment that would have stuck in the minds of everybody for a long time. And I'm just glad it didn't end that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be traumatic enough what these kids face, but, adding to that. And again, I'm glad that you were able to reach him and to, did he ever put the knives down? I mean, or did he just sort of stand there, like you said, zombie-like until the police did show up?
The weirdest thing happened. He started talking to me about, you know, do I feel safe? And he was asking questions like, do you feel safe? And I'm like, yes, I feel safe. I'm standing in my yard. I have a I have a 9 millimeter in my hand. I feel safe. Do you feel safe? I'm starting to try to just conversate with him because wherever he was, I wanted to kind of meet him there and say, you're making a terrible decision right
Yeah.
now. And I'm just sitting there and he's asking me, he's saying, well, you're closer to killing me than I am to killing you. And none of these things are really making sense at that particular time. And he's like, well, are you renting or you homeowning? I'm like, dude, go home. And meanwhile, I've already told my wife to call the authorities. She's on the phone with 911. I hear her, giving the directions and all of that. So I just wanted him to go home so that the police could do what they needed to do and get him out of the way. But and also I was worried about him being there when the police got there. That's a whole nother thing
Yeah.
that was going through my mind at that point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, we
You
just
know,
talked about the traumatic
standing in the middle of the
experience it
street
would
holding
be.
2 knives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So did he go home? Was he back in his house when police got there?
So he did go home. And the police went, they stopped at my house first and they asked us where he lived. We told him he went and he came outside. And that's when it got weird because I didn't learn about this until the Tidewater News had put their report out. But there was in the article it said that he told the police that he had just came from the depths of hell and that he was about to start speaking Vatican and African. So clearly he was somewhere else, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
well, wherever he was, again, I'm glad that you were able to get to him at least for a moment. Because now, again, he hopefully get the help that he needs, and everybody was safe and sound. And you seem like the kind of guy, Terrell, to brush this off, but I think a big reason why everybody was safe and sound was because of how you acted, and because of how you responded in that moment. So, first of all, thank you. Do you have any advice to people? I mean, again, as you say, when you can train, but you don't know how you're going to react. Thinking back now, is there any advice, any tips that you could give for people to kind of keep in mind if they ever do find themselves in a similar situation where they have to respond?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, thank you for those kind words because it has been a struggle for me. I do suffer with PTSD from things that I went through in 2019. I was robbed at gunpoint um, while just getting gas at a gas station. And I had just dropped off my wife and my kids at home at the time. And that has kind of just stuck with me for so many years to the point where I actually moved different. And it's one of the reasons why I did invest in my, firearms and things of that nature, because I just wanted to be able to protect myself and my family in the event that anything like that ever happened again. So this whole thing has been, I'm going to say weird. Okay. And the reason why I'm going to say weird, and I don't want to get emotional on your show and mess it up or anything.
Yeah, dude,
But it's just been,
we're listen, dude, we're allowed to be emotional on this show. It's okay. No one's going to give you any grief. At least not me.
well, I thank you, but it's just been, you know, a real traumatic experience for me too, because I don't feel like a hero, as the word that's been going around. I don't feel like a hero because I just feel like I was just doing what I would have done any other day. You know what I mean? I and I just it almost hurts my feelings that the rest of the world isn't that way. You know, it almost hurts my feelings that I couldn't trust my sons or my daughters to play outside and know that if something like that happens, that somebody's gonna step up and protect them. But I'm just glad I was there, and I'm glad I was able to be that for those children that day. And you know, for that, I'll always be grateful for the God that He allowed me to have that day off on Juneteenth, 2024. And
Absolutely.
and also, um, you were talking about advice. I would just say for everybody to just try to put yourself in somebody else's world just for a second, you know, because you don't always have to go to the extreme at first. Sometimes you can let things build up and let things progress. And in this case, we see that, sometimes if you just talk, if you just communicate, you might be able to make a change. You might be able to save someone's life.
Bro, listen, man, I really appreciate you spending some time with me this evening. I'm glad that Mother Nature cooperated and it's not 95 degrees for either one of us. Um, and, listen, I got to say, I mean, normally when I talk to somebody because of an incident in the news, I tend to say, oh, thanks for joining us and, have a good life. Man, I want to have you back if you don't mind. I really appreciate what you said this evening, and I would like to hear more from you in the future. So will you come back in a couple of weeks? And I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I'd love to just hang out again when the weather cooperates. Next cool evening.
Hey,
Can we do it?
absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely. Right here from my garden, man. I love you.
Awesome. Well, I'll join you from my he shed / office. So, hey, listen, go enjoy the rest of your evening with your kids. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Thank you for talking with us. And man, you got me all emotional, Terrell. Here I'm telling you. So there you go. You know that you can get emotional on this show because you made me a little choked up. But it was really good to meet you. Thank you again for reaching out to me. And I look forward to having you on again and continue this conversation in the future. My thanks again to Terrell for coming on the program, and I am looking forward to having him back on the show in the very near future. All right, before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, let's talk about this for just 1 second. At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle that we hold sacred: free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving a lot of us feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where Wealth Protection Research steps in, armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech, committed to giving a voice to the silence. Now, they tirelessly seek out financial experts, the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. And boy, are there some uncertainties these days. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 election wealth protection report highlighting the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas that mainstream media won't touch, and you can get it completely free. Just text IDEAS to 76626 for your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, then act now. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 election protection report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. All right, turning now to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day and our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of Chicago. Not necessarily a true recidivist report. This might have been a first offense, but it is still mind-boggling. A teenager gets probation after bringing a gun to school and allegedly firing a shot in Chicago. Yeah. According to the Chicago Tribune, 17-year-old Jermaine Robinson pleaded guilty to level 6 felony possession of a firearm on school property. His sentence, 2 years on probation with 198 days credit for time that he already spent in jail while the case is pending. So basically, he's done. I mean, he might have a couple of more months left on probation, but after that, he's free and clear. As part of the plea deal, he also has to do 30 hours of community service and get his GED. I say, by the way, this was in Chicago. I apologize. This was actually in Gary, Indiana, right across the border. Gary police responded back in January for a shots fired call. Principal Janora Holmes told police that there was a bullet that had been fired at about 8:53 a.m. School was on lockdown. They couldn't find the gun. School staff found bullet fragments in the bathroom. They then took Robinson to the dean's office to wait for police. Police recovered a bullet casing in the bathroom as well. Security footage in the bathroom apparently showed, or I guess outside of the bathroom, showed 4 students, including Robinson, coming out of the bathroom after the gun was fired. The other 3 boys not implicated. While police were there, Robinson allegedly tried to jump out of the window in the dean's office and was mouthy with police officers while he was on the phone with his mom. Now, that's not really a crime. When officers pinned him against the wall and patted him down, they found a magazine as well as gun parts. He then tried to pull away from an officer who grabbed him by the handcuffs. The handgun, according to the affidavit, had 15 live rounds in the magazine. And again, a shot allegedly fired, even though Robinson ultimately pleaded guilty to simple possession of a firearm on school property. And, you know, I'd love to ding this on Illinois, but this is Gary, Indiana. So even in a state that is pretty conservative, where we think it's, pretty tough on crime, you bring a gun to a school, you fire a round, and you're basically going to walk away with a slap on the wrist and time served. That just seems wrong to me. Now, today's Armed Citizen story, also from Indiana, I believe, Yoder, Indiana, Allen County, where an intruder was shot and killed by a homeowner just a couple of days ago. This was Saturday evening. Allen County Sheriff's Department responded on reports of a shooting just after 5:30 in Yoder. When they got there, officers found one man inside the home that had been shot. EMS was dispatched. The man later pronounced dead at the scene. Brent Bollinger, who's an officer with the Allen County Sheriff's Department, told WANE TV that an uninvited male entered a mobile home while armed. The male homeowner, who was also inside when the man entered, fired several shots, striking and killing the intruder. Officers at the scene were told that the intruder was previously in a relationship with the female resident of the home. WANE reports that it's unclear why the man entered the home. No one else was inside, no one else inside the home was injured. There were 2 kids inside that home. Thankfully, they were okay, as were the 2 homeowners. Investigation is still ongoing, but based on the evidence at the scene, this certainly sounds like a pretty clear-cut case of self-defense. So we'll keep our eyes open for any updates as they become available. Finally, today, our good deed of the day, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A deputy in Monroe County, Michigan, who saved the life of a man who drove into a pond overnight in Deerfield Township, Michigan. Now, again, you might think, wow, it's a pond. I mean, what could happen? Apparently, the guy couldn't swim. It was about just after midnight. Dispatch got a 911 call from a resident saying that they could hear somebody yelling for help in the darkness, saying that they couldn't swim. Deputies responded. Deputy Shauna Hester, the first there on the scene, she said she saw a man in the water about 20 feet offshore. He was struggling to stay afloat, so she jumped into the water. And with the help of a homeowner who gave her a flotation device, she was able to swim over, rescue the man. While investigating, they determined that a vehicle was possibly involved, but the man gave conflicting information about whether or not somebody else was in the vehicle, so they had to bring out the dive team. They were able to recover a unoccupied black Jeep Wrangler from the pond. Thankfully, nobody else involved in this. Don't know what might have led to this individual in the pond. Won't speculate, but again, thankfully, there was a deputy there who not afraid to get a little wet and potentially save a man's life in the midnight hour there in Monroe County, Michigan. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you, as always, for being a part of the program. Again, hopefully on tomorrow's show, we're going to be talking more about the Supreme Court's inaction, I guess, is the best way to describe it, with Chuck Michel, Cody Wisniewski, maybe both of them. Also scheduled to talk with Larry Keene from the National Shooting Sports Foundation, so you'll hear that interview tomorrow as well. In the meantime, I would encourage you, check out BearingArms.com throughout the day. We're keeping you up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. And if you like what you see, I would encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member. Just go to BearingArms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code SAVEAmerica. You can get a significant discount on your VIP membership. You will get exclusive content, an ad-free experience, the ability to comment on stories, and other benefits. You will also be supporting the independent pro-Second Amendment journalism that we do at Bearing Arms, and your support is critically important these days, so thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your 2A Tuesday. I will be on Newsmax in the 5 p.m. Eastern hour, kicking around some of the day's top stories with Carl Higbee. Hope you can check that out as well. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.